Hey, what's up, man? Dude, guess what? I just bought a new car. Yeah, dude, it's a Kia. Hello? Hello? Huh. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Cars today, some of them at least, are getting pretty dull. So, for example, the new Mitsubishi Eclipse is now a crossover. We're losing the Ford Focus RS, and the US is losing the Fiesta ST, but we're gaining the Ford Edge ST. That's exciting, right? So while everyone in America is buying crossovers, Kia is making something of all companies very exciting. This is the Kia Stinger GT. This is actually the GT2 spec, so it's the top line 3.3 liter V6, 365 horsepower, 376 pound-feet of torque from the twin turbo V6. Pretty impressive numbers. This one that we're in is rear-wheel drive. They do also offer it in all-wheel drive. And the all-wheel drive has a very clever center differential, so it can send 50% of the torque up to the front, or you can put it in sport mode and send 80% of the torque to the rear wheels. Now, the base Stinger gets a 2-liter inline 4-cylinder twin-scroll turbocharged engine, still fairly potent, 255 horsepower, 260 pound-feet of torque. So regardless of what Stinger you get into, you're going to have a decent amount of power. Now, the weight changes dramatically depending on what you get. So, the base, you're going to be around 3,600 pounds. You add 200 pounds for the V6, and you add another 200 pounds for the all-wheel drive V6. So if you get in the GT with all-wheel drive, you're at 4,000 pounds, which is a decent amount of heft. But, this is actually a pretty nice, pretty comfortable ride. And so you've got different driving modes. You can kind of change the characteristics of the vehicle. I've got it in comfort now, enjoyable here in the rain, and actually quite tame with the rear end. So the rear end hasn't been getting all that wild on me. The tire's doing a nice job. And when you get into the GT, which we are in, you upgrade the tires and the suspension, so it's got an electronic suspension, electronically adjustable damping, and you upgrade to Michelin Pilot Sport 4 tires. And these Sport 4 tires are fantastic, wet or dry. The compound is designed so that in low, lateral scenarios, the inside of the tire is designed for wet grip, and the outside of the tire, when you're in high lateral speed scenarios, is designed for dry grip. So even in these terrible conditions that I'm driving it today, I've got good acceleration grip and fantastic braking grip with these tires. And also another cool thing that they do with the suspension here, one of the things you kind of notice is the steering in this car is actually quite responsive, and that comes down to the tires and also comes down to the suspension. And one of the cool things they do with the suspension, as it's electronically variable, is they soften up the front and they stiffen the rear, and that's at low speed. So at low speeds, you've got a soft front and you've got stiff rear. And what this does is it makes it more responsive. It makes it more eager to turn in, less likely to understeer. And then as you increase your speed, as you start to get in higher speeds, it stiffens up the front, and then it reduces the stiffness in the rear, the damping stiffness, and as a result, it gives you better stability, so you're less likely to oversteer at high speeds. So a very clever way that they're manipulating the suspension in order to maximize, how the car feels at low speeds, but also maintain stability at high speeds. And it is certainly noticeable. The steering is actually good, and I don't know if I've ever said that about driving a Kia. It's pretty impressive. It's an electronic rack. It's got a variable ratio depending on how much you're turning it in. And that steering rack, they've got the motor offset, so it's not in the steering column. It's separately mounted on that steering rack, and that helps to improve the way it feels. And it does actually feel pretty good. Now, as far as these different driving modes, you've got 5: Smart, Eco, Comfort, Sport, and Custom. And I have found myself enjoying Comfort the most, which I've been surprised by. In Sport, I was trying out the paddle shifters. This has an 8-speed automatic transmission developed by Kia, and it's probably one of the few things about this car that I'm not totally thrilled on. The shifts are a little rough, and they're a decent speed, but there's a little kind of uncertainty to it as it switches gears. It's kind of got a little hesitation there, which it's not the smoothest transmission. But when you put it in comfort mode, it loses a lot of that characteristic that it has in sport, and it seems to be just as quick, except now it's actually a smooth transition, and you don't get that hesitation, that notchiness that you feel in sport mode. So I've been enjoying comfort mode driving in this car. Now, every manufacturer likes to talk about the Nürburgring. This car was developed on the Nürburgring. They say that every prototype that they developed spent at least 480 laps going around that quite long circuit. And so, they really have punished this vehicle out on a track to prove its performance. And that's pretty impressive. 3,800 pounds is quite a bit of heft. And so to have a vehicle that can be punished for those 480 laps in development, handle the high-speed cornering, handle the significant amounts of braking, the cooling requirements that are required to drive out there on a track and drive hard is impressive. So, it's kind of something that in the automotive world has become this cliche of like, oh yeah, we developed that at the Nürburgring. But for Kia to do that, that seems pretty special. They brought over engineers, from other big name German manufacturers. So, there's a lot of ingenuity and there's a lot of clever designing that's gone into this vehicle. The interior actually reminds me quite a bit of a Mercedes, and I don't know if that's necessarily bad that it looks like they're copying it, but the interior is quite nice. So kind of just like Mercedes, they've got this pop-out infotainment display right here. Kind of looks like an iPad going on. You've got the circular air nozzles beneath it for your climate system. Even the speakers, the metallic speaker covers look a bit similar. So there are many similarities, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. You've got a heated steering wheel, you've got heated and cooled seats, you've got all these luxury amenities, adaptive cruise control, and this is a Kia. So you tell your friend that you bought a BMW, and they're excited because you said you bought a BMW. And you tell your friend that you bought a Kia, and they're not excited because you told them that you bought a Kia. But the reality is, none of us are looking at 3 Series BMWs as they drive by. It's not like we're snapping our necks to check out the latest 3 Series. And this is a legitimately cool, very capable, legitimately fun vehicle. And it has a badge that people aren't thrilled to say, oh yeah, I drive a Kia. But it's got the performance that matters, and it's going to, actually entertain the person who's driving it. And that seems way more important than flashing around your ego and saying, okay, I drive, something with 4 rings around the front on the front of my car. Is it actually a legitimately great car? Maybe yes, maybe no, but for less money, you can get quite a bit of performance out of this thing. 0 to 60 in 4.7 seconds with the 3.3 liter. You've got 4 piston Brembo brakes up front, 2 piston in the rear, 15 speaker system, 720 watts. There's a subwoofer under both the driver and the passenger seat. The sound system in this is phenomenal. It's got a tremendous amount of bass, good clarity to it, very great sound system. So, there's not a whole lot of sacrifices really that you're making. I mean, this is a truly pleasant, very nice, and genuinely fun vehicle to drive. The brake pedal, it's got a sporty feel to it. It doesn't have a whole lot of travel. It's, more pressure-based as far as your braking. The throttle, decent mapping with that. There is turbo lag, but it's not bad. If you get up into those high RPM, put your foot down, yeah, there's a little bit of turbo lag. I mean, it's certainly noticeable, but it's not bad. And the thing actually sounds quite good. I don't know if it's piping in, artificial sounds or not. Ignorance is bliss in this scenario. It sounds great, actually, especially for a V6 and a turbo V6, which tends to just kind of mute the sound. This actually sounds quite good when you get on it. And an impressive amount of grip out here in the wet. So, are your friends going to think you're cool when you tell them on the phone that you bought a new Kia sports car? Nah, they're not going to think so. But once they get in it, once they ride along with you, this thing is genuinely pretty fantastic. I mean, my few complaints are that I don't think the 8-speed automatic transmission is all that phenomenal, and your rear view visibility is pretty poor. It's pretty cramped up back there as far as looking out the back. And so, blind spot's fine, out the front is fine. It's a little narrow up here, but the rear visibility isn't all that phenomenal. And, you know, I think there could be some tweaks to the transmission that would make it a little bit better. But again, in comfort mode, for the most part, it's pretty nice. So overall, I've quite enjoyed driving this. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below.